Welcome to the GOYA Gatherings podcast, a serene and inspiring space where the worlds of yoga and wellness converge. Every episode is a journey into the heart of yoga, offering you deep insights, uplifting stories, and practical wisdom. Our conversations are designed to inspire your journey and illuminate your path to well-being. Please remember that the views expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of GOYA Gatherings or its hosts.
Welcome to the GOYA Gatherings podcast. My name is Mark. I'm part of the leadership team here at GOYA, and I'm very grateful to have a close friend, a close, wonderful colleague, and all-around wonderful person on the podcast with us today, Angela Inglis. So I thought before we even dive into who you are, what you do, what you're going to talk about today, Angela, I wondered if you could share with us just a funny anecdote or something interesting about you that maybe people don't know.
Oh, my heavens. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm always happy to be here and to chat with you in any context. And a funny anecdote, funny is not my strength, although it is a quality I've been developing lately. But I guess I can tell you a funny anecdote about, a slightly funny anecdote about my first introduction to yoga many, many, many years ago. In 1995, I was in musical dinner theater. That's what I was working in at the time. And I was living in Edmonton, Canada. And one of my cast members and I used to go to the YMCA for exercise, and there was a yoga class. And we thought, wow, let's try yoga. That sounds exciting. So we took this yoga class, and the teacher was this lovely woman from Korea who was probably the age that I am now then. And she was an absolutely lovely yoga teacher. And I just remember feeling so mystified by some of the things that we would do in class. I was very young at the time. And I remember I would close my eyes sometimes when doing things because we would be, in triangle pose or something. And I would just intuitively close my eyes, and she would say, open your eyes. And she would be like, stay present with what you're doing. And then I would ask her, just questions that now at this time in my life with my experience in yoga sound so adorably naive and innocent. And I remember going up to her after class one time and saying, why do we just lay there with our eyes closed at the end? And she said, for integration. And I was like, wow, okay. And then I have to say that I really owe a lot to her because she was incredibly encouraging as a teacher. And not only that, she made it absolutely beautiful. And I'll give you a couple of examples. She would tell me frequently in a very light and sweet way, and in front of everyone else in the class, that I must have been a yogi in a former life because I was very flexible, and I think it was mostly based on that. But then also she made the practice of yoga something really special because in our Shavasana time, she would sing these beautiful songs in Korean. And so our Shavasana was a soundtrack of her singing these lilting songs in her beautiful little bird-like voice in Korean. And I'm so thankful, even in this moment, reiterating this or sharing this story with you. I'm so thankful for that first introduction because so much about her and the experience that she presented, the unique experience that she presented of yoga was really, it formed the foundation of my experience with yoga. And I took beginners classes with her for years, even when I was no longer a beginner, because I just loved going slowly and, learning from her and being in her presence. So I guess that's a testimonial for her. I don't even know if she's practicing anymore. Also for yoga. And yeah, that was my introduction really to this whole world of wellness.
I love that because it tells us so much about you without you having to list off your bio, your interests, or even a little bit about who you are. And maybe because I know you a little bit as well from over the years of us being together and working together, that it makes sense when you tell me that story, because it really does share a lot about you. And it also highlights the importance of that first contact as well in the world of, well, in the world of anything, but in this case of yoga, how formative that first period of classes can be in terms of making someone feel welcome and comfortable and having a great experience versus feeling like an outsider or not welcome. So pretty kudos to your teacher.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, telling you that story right now really did make me realize all of those things that you just pointed out, and I'm so grateful that she was my first experience with it, and that she was just 100% herself as well, singing and shavasana, and yeah, it was a lovely introduction, and I'm grateful.
And it leads so beautifully into what we're going to be talking about today, which is embracing a multidisciplinary path. The reason I thought that it would be very helpful to have you on the podcast is, at least what I've noticed myself in the yoga world, is that after, like, a common path that I've seen is that people begin teaching yoga, and then at some point in that journey of teaching yoga, not everybody, but a fair portion of people I've noticed begin to branch out and explore other disciplines, other ways to sort of supplement income or to help their students or to sort of add on to what it is that they're doing. And you come to this with, I think, such an interesting beginning, middle, and I'm not going to say end, but current period of your life where you really are a multidisciplinary practitioner. And so I'd love to begin with just to ask, what was it that inspired you to begin branching out into Ayurveda, yoga, massage therapy, and now acupuncture and music? Because that's also, I'm not sure if that's something that you list as one of your multidisciplines, but yeah, I'd love to hear how, why.
Thanks. Yeah, I'd love to share. So interestingly, I took yoga, as I was telling you, and that was back in 1995. Those were my first classes. A long, long time ago, I took yoga. However, in terms of learning deeply about something, my path actually started with Ayurveda, and then very soon after went into yoga. And as many people listening will probably know, Ayurveda is traditional Indian medicine, and yoga is actually a part of Ayurveda. But Ayurveda is not necessarily a part of yoga, which is to say that Ayurveda embraces the practice of yoga as the sort of spiritual practice that fits into the Ayurvedic scope. Whereas, you can practice yoga without necessarily practicing Ayurveda. And in any case, the point is that I became interested in Ayurveda in the very early 2000s. And I think my first introduction was in 2002. And I slowly started learning about Ayurveda in response to sort of a necessity in my life and the lives of my loved ones to begin to understand how I could support the health and healing of myself and others more fully. Now, before that, and around the time soon after I took my first yoga classes, I also worked at a health food store. So I also had this full-time health food store for about a year, learning about supplements, learning about herbs, but Western herbs, most things from a Western perspective through the biomedical lens and so on. And then I was introduced to Ayurveda about, 7 years later. And then from there, I eventually decided to go to India to study Ayurveda, and studied at the Ayurveda University in Gujarat, and then studied with Vasant Lad, those who have read some books on Ayurveda will probably be familiar with his name because he's written a lot of the books for Westerners on Ayurveda. And when I started learning more deeply about Ayurveda, and so not just the dietary practices, the lifestyle practices, and those were things that I was introduced to by an Indian Vaidya, an Ayurvedic doctor from India, who I had met in Vancouver at the time and gone to see for an Ayurvedic consultation. And he had made suggestions about diet, about lifestyle, about taking certain herbs and supplements even. But he hadn't made any suggestions for doing yoga or anything like that. And so at this time in my life, yoga was still a personal practice that I just sort of did on my own when I was going to the gym to do cardio. And then I would do, some yoga afterwards on my own in the stretching area. But I wasn't deeply into yoga yet at that time. So then, like I said, I started to learn about Ayurveda. Then I eventually went to India and learned Ayurveda at a university. And then I learned with Dr. Vasant Lad in person in India. And then I went to the Ayurvedic Institute, used to be in Albuquerque, New Mexico. When I got back to Canada, I studied there as well. However, when I was still in India, and just after I had been taking Ayurveda in university and then learning from Dr. Vasant Lad, I then went and I thought, I really love yoga. I'm in India. Why not take a yoga teacher training while I'm here? So I went to Rishikesh in India and I took a yoga teacher training. And even at that time, I thought, maybe I just thought I was doing that because, yoga is a part of Ayurveda and I love Ayurveda and I knew I wanted to be an Ayurvedic practitioner. So I thought, I should learn more about yoga because then I can, help people in the context of Ayurvedic consultations, et cetera. And it's also very good for me to practice yoga and expand my knowledge. But when I got back to Canada, a friend of mine asked if I wanted to start teaching some classes that he no longer wanted to teach, and yoga classes. And so I started teaching those yoga classes, thinking it was just something I would do on the side. And I fell deeply in love with being a yoga teacher. So then I was practicing, within a year, I was teaching yoga almost exclusively. And then I was also starting to teach Ayurveda in the context of yoga teacher trainings, doing workshops at community centers, offering consultations, to people that I met through all this other work, through my yoga work, and through yoga teacher training work. And so that's around 2007 now, 2008, 2009. And there I'm developing my full-time yoga teaching practice, and then also all the Ayurveda stuff. So I did that for a lot of years. And in and around 2015, I had the opportunity to meet someone that I ended up working with for years, and how I met you as well. And so working for a company that teaches yoga teacher trainings, and wanted me to develop the Ayurveda portion of their trainings. And so then I started to find my a sort of niche thing that I do and love, which is the development of curriculum and the delivery of curriculum. So it's through all of these developments in my life that I sort of continue to find, I guess, more and more ways of using these modalities that I had already learned. There were so many yoga teachers at that point, and it started to look in Vancouver, Canada, around the year 2018, like it started to look like the industry was shifting in a way that instead of me making more money, because I was at that point a teacher with 11 years of experience and lots of, other modalities even under my belt. I shouldn't say lots and lots, but a few other modalities under my belt. It looked like actually my ability to make a living only teaching yoga was being undermined by just the simple realistic fact that there were lots of yoga teachers available, and that businesses that had developed to make a profit teaching yoga and were prioritizing that profit, some of the bigger companies that were employing yoga teachers at the time, they were starting to opt to hire new teachers that they could pay less, and then letting go of, or at least reducing the classes for the experienced yoga teachers who many of us, I made the same amount per class for 10 years at most of the places I worked. I made the exact same amount in 2008 that I was making in 2018, teaching at most of the places that I taught at in Vancouver, Canada, for in-person classes. So what was a really great rate in 2010 was no longer a really great rate in 2018. And then on top of it, all of a sudden I started hearing from colleagues that they were losing their jobs to newer teachers who could be paid less. And so there were a couple of things, that were happening, and all the while, of course, costs are rising and so on. So I have a genuine interest in different modalities and in the ability to help people in as many ways as I possibly can to live more meaningful and fulfilling lives through the, practice of these different modalities. However, if I'm honest, in and around 2018, I thought I need a more lucrative and secure livelihood, because this isn't looking very secure for me in the way that I've been doing it. And this was pre-pandemic, so it was also pre-online yoga and that kind of thing. So it's just that at that time, the industry was very much an in-person industry, and the industry as it was in 2018 wasn't looking like it was going to support me for much longer. So it was at that point that I started to look at other options. And then I was looking at two specifically. I was looking at getting a master's in counseling psychology, or studying to be an RMT, a registered massage therapist in British Columbia, Canada. That's a registered health profession. And so it's a little bit different in some ways than what it looks like in other places in the world. So in 2018, I did a bunch of research, and in the end, I decided to pursue becoming a registered massage therapist in British Columbia, because in my research, I noticed that they were in high demand. And so they were in much higher demand than counselors. I had a friend tell me that he was a counselor himself. And I had a friend him tell me that all his counseling friends were looking for work and all his RMT friends were booked up for months. So, and then I had friends who lived on Vancouver Island, and they were saying that it took them 2 to 3 weeks to get in with an RMT. So I thought, okay, well, this looks pretty, so in that sense, there was a high demand. And then when I looked at job security, because it is a registered profession in British Columbia, it has more status than in some other places. And that status leads to more insurance money. So what it means is that in terms of job security, it means that as long as registered massage therapists continue to be regulated in British Columbia and viewed with the same status that they have now, then there will be a lot of available insurance money. And that means that even in a time like when we're talking right now, which is, the very, end of 2024, beginning of 2025, we're in a time of really high inflation when a lot of people can't afford a lot of what they might consider not necessities. However, because insurance companies in British Columbia still offer the same insurance they always have for RMT services, which is a lot of money, for example, healthcare professionals who make up a large part of my clientele, occupational therapists, nurses, and respiratory therapists, they have unlimited massage. So that means that no matter what amount they're making or what inflation is happening, as long as the insurance money available stays the same, I always have a lot of job security as an RMT. So to be totally honest, I thought, all things considered, this is a modality that fits beautifully with my interest in supporting others in living more meaningful and fulfilling lives, because I think that the self-care that it allows people to pursue, that, massage, getting therapeutic massage, is my kind of really big perspective is that, here in the wealthy parts of the world, we hold a lot of power because we have a lot of privilege and we have a lot of money. And if the world is going to change, it's going to change because people with privilege and power and wealth start making better decisions about how to support those in other places that are being exploited and so on. And how can we make those ethical, empathetic decisions if we don't have any access to our own empathy, because we're so overworked and overwrought and overwhelmed that we can't afford to feel or pay attention to these things. And so it's a really big, huge vision. But my idea with being an RMT, similar to all the modalities that I have, is this idea that if I can help people feel more comfort in their body, more ease in their day-to-day life in that sense, and experience more peace in their minds, then they will become more sensitive and more empathetic, because they're not just fighting with their own physical or mental condition. So in that sense, they'll have the capacity to consider things that are maybe not always the easiest things, like making more ethical decisions about how they live their lives, meaning decisions that support those who are less privileged or who exploit less those who are less privileged in other places. So just in terms of lifestyle, Western lifestyle, consumerism, acquisitive lifestyle, like just getting stuff. My hope and intention is to support people in being able, first and foremost, to achieve the kind of mind-body health that will allow them to prioritize the quality of their day-to-day experience over the acquisition of consumer goods, or that will give them the energy that they need to think, where's the most ethical source for me to acquire this, rather than just the easiest place because I don't have any energy and I just need the fastest, easiest way to make this purchase. And so it's a very grand vision. But my idea is that, with all the things I do, but moving into RMT, I'll say that this is what I've been explaining is sort of the justification for recognizing that being a registered massage therapist, on the surface, it looks like I'm really just working with people's musculoskeletal system. And then, of course, I am working with their nervous system as well. And so I would prefer to have a more educational approach where I'm supporting people, helping people help themselves has always been my preference, rather than doing the work for people. Or just telling them what to do. So my preference has always been that I really love educating people so that they become empowered to help themselves. And that's definitely something I do with Ayurveda consultations, with teaching yoga, which is to say teaching breathing, meditation, mindfulness, mindful movement, and so on. But with RMT, it's kind of more like it's a context where people come and I do something to them. And so I think in order to make myself sort of be able to place this in the context of what I really love to do, which is to educate people and support people in living more fulfilling and meaningful lives, in hopes that ultimately that will constellate into making the world a better place. What I just described is sort of my way of placing massage therapy in the context of making the world a better place, I guess, which is a really big vision. But that is what allows me to sort of see how it fits in with my passions. But I've also led you to why I now am studying traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture, and then ultimately herbs as well. And it's because after studying to be an RMT and becoming an RMT, I was already in my late 40s by the time I was in the second half of my 40s by the time I became an RMT. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was suffering from extremely low iron, extremely low ferritin levels. And I found that the physical work of being a registered massage therapist full time was too much for my capacity at that time. And like I said, at that time, I didn't know that I had this underlying, quite serious iron deficiency condition that was really depleting my energy. But in that period before I figured that out, I thought I need another way to make a living as I age, regardless of the state of my health, or fairly, regardless of whether I don't have this kind of perfectly able-bodied full energy capacity, because I knew that I probably wouldn't be able to do registered massage therapy until I was, say, 80, for example. And in this day and age, that is a realistic projection that I will be working until I'm 80. And so, I've always had a guiding principle from a very young age that when you do work you love, you don't feel like you're working. So I actually have no dreams about retirement. I only have dreams about doing work I love that I can do until I'm elderly, because that would be my preference, would be to continue working and undertaking meaningful projects in the form of supporting and educating and facilitating, the meaningful and fulfilling existence of other people. So that took me to studying in 2022. I started studying traditional Chinese medicine, taking an acupuncture program. And I'm in the last year of that acupuncture program now. And then I'll do a postgraduate year to become a TCM practitioner, which is someone who can then also prescribe herbs. And this is, again, also a regulated profession in British Columbia, which means that there's a decent amount of insurance money for it. But there isn't as much insurance money for it as there is for massage. So being able to do both together is going to be wonderful, because one of them has, a lot more job security, but I can't necessarily do it until through old age, or at least not in the same way that I'm doing it now, which is quite physical. And the other one, the acupuncture and TCMP, I don't need to be able-bodied to put needles in people or prescribe herbs. And so I feel a great sense of relief and calm to know that not only will I be able to offer so many different perspectives and modalities to my clients and the people that I'm supporting, my loved ones and myself, but that I will finally be able to have a suite of offerings that will allow me to work even when maybe my body doesn't work as well as it does now. So that is the extremely long answer to your question. So each step along the way, I guess, various things propelled me toward diversifying and pursuing multiple disciplines. And so, if I were to just boil it all down, part of it is financial security. A big part of it is the common thread is that I want to do work that I love. And what I love is supporting others and living more meaningful and fulfilling lives and living more ethically and more empathetically in the world in hopes of making the world a better place, just one person, one decision at a time.
I'm very grateful that you share those 2 points, especially that there's a financial reason, but then there's also sort of more of an intrinsic motivation, which is the driving force behind everything that you're doing. But the reality out there is that it can be difficult to support yourself with doing just one thing. Even now, for lots of, there's teachers who have weekend jobs. There's, everybody's sort of realizing that there's sometimes a need to diversify, even not just in the field of yoga, for financial reasons. But then when you highlight too that there's a deeper motivation behind that. I think that's a very interesting thing that people could perhaps consider. Like, what is, before they go down any path or launch down any education journey, is sort of having that. I think I just really love the idea of having a guiding principle, like your North Star. It's pretty cool.
Thank you. Well, one thing that there's a sort of it's not so much a caveat, but there's something that I should point out that I think also will help people to contextualize my path in comparison perhaps to their own, should they decide, should that be part of their thought process as they listen to this. And that is that I don't have children. So, for some people, it will be a great choice for them to do work that may not be their passion, because perhaps their family, their children are their passion, or perhaps they're caregivers for their parents or for their extended family or for another family member. And so perhaps they find their fulfillment and their meaning in other aspects of life. And I'm here as the practitioner to help, anyone do that. A lot of my clients have children and they have jobs that, like dental hygienists and occupational therapists, and that give a little bit of fulfillment, I know, to each of them, but their focus is their family, and that's where they're getting more of their fulfillment. But for many people listening to this podcast, they're probably people who find fulfillment in, this kind of mind body wellness exploration. And so understandably, some of us may not have the capacity, the time, the resources of various types to pursue so many different modalities. But because I don't have children and my own family in that sense, I have had the opportunity to direct my resources to continuously learning.
Also, you live in a place in the world where you're able to study those things and practice them. Like for myself, I live in a country in the world where to be an acupuncturist, you need to be a medical doctor. So although it's always been a path that is of interest to me personally, and something that I think in an alternate universe, if I was in a different place in the world, I would definitely be interested in studying and practicing that. It's not possible to do that here without going back to medical school, which is of little interest to me. So it's great that it's sort of like things align and you're in a place in the world where you can study and practice those things, and that they are, which is what we'll get into next, is sort of complementary in a way, which is also really, I think, an important thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. And so you point out a couple more very realistic considerations for exploring different modalities, and why people might explore certain ones and not other ones, or why people might not be able to explore the ones that they necessarily want to. And so it's that balance of the practical and the philosophical that has taken me along this path. And, one more small point that I'll make is that my choice to practice different modalities has also been a recognition of the value of each different lens. And I think we'll end up talking more about that, but I thought it was relevant here to point out that, and I sort of hinted at it already, that as an RMT, I'm working through the musculoskeletal lens and the lens of the nervous system mainly, but I'm not looking at certain other aspects. And so that also has been a big impetus. It's been recognizing that looking through all these different lenses can be so helpful for the purposes of health and healing. And so I'm continuously excited to look through the next lens and see how that may facilitate my own health and healing and that of others.
So then jumping into the next thing is, so you've mentioned that did you mention, maybe I'm making that up, but that they sort of are complementary in a way because of some shared history and background that they have, but also the different body systems that they work with. And so do you, because from my understanding of other conversations we've had together is that I don't want to say that it's a downside, but when you are working in regulated professions, there's regulations. And so when you're working with your clients, is it possible for you to pull from all the different things and to do a session that's got everything that you do in there? Or is it more that certain things influence the way that you see the world, the way that you see humans, the way that you see movement and energy and things like this, and that even if you're just practicing one of the disciplines, behind the scenes, there's maybe some complement or some enhancement or complementary things that are working together? It's a really messy question, but maybe because you know the way that my brain works.
Yes, I think I understand your question. And, we'll probably end up talking about this from a couple of angles, but I'll begin by saying you are right. There are pros and cons to living in a province where these professions are regulated, and you kind of have to take sort of the bad with the good, if you will. And you are right as well that things that you hinted at, that I can't necessarily practice whatever I want in a given appointment if I am practicing under, with my RMT hat on as a registered massage therapist. I have what's called a scope of practice that is dictated by my professional college, the regulatory college in British Columbia, and I can't bring in things that are outside of that scope. So, for example, when I'm doing a massage therapy appointment, I might be well aware that there are certain areas where I'm doing massage that are in the same, that looked at through the TCM lens. It's a particular meridian or it's a particular acupuncture point, and it has these indications and these actions and so on. But I can't even say any of that, even if I wanted to, because it's outside the scope of registered massage therapy. Now, you point at one of the other reasons that I decided to study and practice acupuncture, and that is because their scope of practice is so much more broad. So kind of similar to how yoga is under the umbrella of Ayurveda, but if you do yoga, you don't necessarily know anything about Ayurveda because the yogis weren't necessarily into Ayurveda per se. Similarly, massage is under the umbrella of traditional Chinese medicine services. So acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine have their own massage modality called tuina. And it's, some people just translate it, they just call it Chinese massage, but it's actually quite extensive. And in fact, as a registered massage therapist, there's a lot that has been appropriated from traditional cultures that we now have renamed through the thousands of years, or maybe through the hundreds of years, that this sort of like contemporary version of massage therapy has developed. And so some of these things I already knew, but I didn't have the context for them. For example, in registered massage therapy, we learn a modality or a technique, I guess is a better word for it, called tapotement. It's from the French. And it's a percussive kind of massage, where you're kind of hitting people's bodies, almost playing them like a drama is how I often, or doing karate chops is sometimes how I talk about it. Well, it turns out now that I'm studying TCM, I always suspected it, but it's been confirmed that a lot of these techniques are from tuina. And tuina itself, the Chinese massage, has various traditional schools from which it has grown. So, for example, there's the striking school of tuina is from martial arts, because striking, like hitting. And so what I just described to you that I would affectionately call karate chops before I even knew this, I know now that comes from the striking school of Chinese massage techniques, which is originally from martial arts and then made its way into the practice of traditional Chinese medicine as a way of doing massage. So all that to say that by being an acupuncture practitioner, I can do a lot of what, especially once I'm a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, which is a year postgraduate studies, then I can bring in herbs, which I was already practicing as an Ayurveda practitioner, is herbal prescription. And I can bring in massage, which I was already doing as a registered massage therapist. And I can bring in dietary therapy, which is part of traditional Chinese medicine, but I can pick and choose from the various lenses that I look through for dietary therapy as well. And I can do that all under the umbrella of traditional Chinese medicine practitioner as a regulated profession in British Columbia. The one drawback is that there's not as much insurance money for acupuncturists as there is for massage therapists. So once again, back to the practicalities for someone in my position who is in a position where they probably will need to keep making money for the next, 25 to 30 years. That allows me to do a lot of what I love in the context of, say, an acupuncture appointment. But if there's not enough business in that area, then I can also do some massage work and do some Ayurveda consultations on the side. And for example, recent Ayurveda consultations that I've been doing, I'm now actually prescribing or suggesting, I won't say prescribing, actually, that's not the right word. I'm suggesting Chinese herb formulations because they're actually much more available in Canada. So for Canadian customers and in some other areas of the world, they're much more available than Ayurvedic herbs. So they're all sort of feeding and helping each other and allowing me to have a more comprehensive perspective. Furthermore, because I'm starting to finally have enough experience with the traditional Chinese medicine lens in terms of diagnosis, identifying syndromes and patterns, and recognizing, what kind of treatment therefore a person needs, being able to harmonize my Ayurvedic lens and my traditional Chinese medicine lens is allowing me to understand a person's condition in an even more refined way than I was able to looking only through the Ayurvedic lens. So in that sense, there are so many ways that I am starting to use the practices together, even if I might be a little bit restricted in certain areas when it comes to the professional practice under regulatory colleges in British Columbia. But what I do find for sure is that it's wonderful to be able, as you said, to be looking through all these lenses in the background. Even if I can't, for example, educate someone about their diet through any modality in the context of being a registered massage therapist, because that's out of scope, I can at least ask about their diet and understand what the implications might be through those other lenses, but then treat them and speak to them and support them with practices through the musculoskeletal lens and the nervous system lens, which are, that scope of practice. And thankfully, I teach these things as well right now at the acupuncture school. I teach some classes, and so I get to sort of think deeply and carefully about all of these things and then support other people in doing similarly, because I teach ethics and business practice management and professional communication, as well as anatomy at the acupuncture school, because these are all things that I already have a background in. And so we have lots of mature students going through acupuncture school, lots of people who have other modalities that they're drawing on. And I'm glad that I've done all this deep, thinking about how to make sense of everything and how to make it work practically and in the real world, because then again, I get to share which is part of my passion, is helping others to help others and to help themselves. And so it's really finally feels like my whole life is coming together, and it's really wonderful. And one last thing I'll say about how all the modalities assist me in assisting clients, for example, and it's actually quite a big one, is that I'm really able to meet people where they're at because I have so many lenses that I can look through. And yet I can use them all in the background, like you say, to give the best possible support, acknowledging whatever scope of practice I might be working within at a given time and following those regulations. But for example, I have clients that have become my massage therapy clients who are part of the biomedical world and who respond to direction and education around, musculoskeletal perspectives and through that lens. However, they also have, for example, insurance money for acupuncture, and some of them don't use it because they have not had an introduction to that world, I guess, that has compelled them to explore that modality. But because I've spent years with these clients and developed a therapeutic relationship with them, and there's a lot of trust there, many of them have already expressed a desire to try acupuncture once I'm an acupuncturist. So it's also really rewarding to know that by developing these therapeutic alliances and relationships with people through one modality, they become potentially open to using another modality. And I think that what's most wonderful about this is not just that it's going to be good for my pocketbook, but that it means that they'll have an even better chance of effective treatment, supporting and enhancing their mind-body health, their sense of well-being, and so on. And that, because I tell my clients all the time, whether it's within the scope of practice of massage, or whether it's within the scope of practice of Ayurveda, or whether it's within the scope of practice of acupuncture and TCM, I don't know what's going to work for you. I don't know. And I make the joke all the time, I'm just throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. So what's beautiful is that, when you have someone that has a chronic pain condition, for example, and has been approaching it only through one lens, and not necessarily maybe even realizing, or maybe just not open to another lens, when they develop a therapeutic relationship and there's trust, then there's a greater opportunity for them to feel more open to and drawn to other modalities. And now that I practice several of them, they can continue with the same practitioner and see the results that come when they sort of come at this challenging and complex mind-body health condition through various avenues and various modalities. So another very long answer to your question.
No, it's a nice way to end that answer, because it relates back to your driving sort of motivation, which is helping people to be more connected to themselves, to make better decisions. The more tools you have at your disposal and the more tools they're open to, the greater possibility for affecting that change, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, that's my hope. And I think it's realistic as well. I think it's realistic to consider that different things are going to work for different people. And furthermore, different things are going to work at different times of life. And one of the things I really love most, and another big reason that I chose to study acupuncture, is that a lot of the other modalities that I work with require a lot of active participation on the part of the client. So massage, not on the surface, but part of massage is therapeutic exercise. And so I do make suggestions for people, things they can do to help cope with musculoskeletal tensions, pain, so on and so forth. What kind of strengthening exercises, functional mobility, and that kind of thing. but that requires that a person has the capacity to learn it, to remember it, to integrate it into everyday life. And similarly with Ayurveda, I absolutely love Ayurveda, and there are tons of practices, and some of them are very small and easy to integrate and still very impactful. But the fact is that they are still all active. The person meditates, the person does a breathing practice, the person changes their diet, the person changes their lifestyle, they add something to their daily routine, they take something away that's maybe not been ultimately great for them, they have to take herbs, so on and so forth. Acupuncture is the only thing in the traditional medicine perspectives that I use that is passive. So one thing that's wonderful about massage, in fact, is that it's passive. It allows people, just like acupuncture, it allows people to just come in, lay down on a table, and have something done to them that can help shift their nervous system and shift their current state of mind-body health to a place where they can be more resourced, where they can actually have the capacity to then begin to slowly make those active changes. So one of the hurdles I found in practicing Ayurveda was not only that it's not as well known. And so I was always having to explain to people it's traditional Indian medicine. This is what the scope of practice looks like. These are the different things that you could try, but all of them are very active. And so one thing I do really love about acupuncture, and again, to be fair, also massage, is that a lot of times people are so overwrought, overwhelmed. They're in a position where they can't make active changes. They just don't have the capacity or the resources. And acupuncture and massage can help them get over that hurdle to the point where they have recovered enough wellness in their nervous system, enough ease in their body, that they can then make those more active changes that are going to be the things that will sustain them and prevent, ill health in the years to come. But being able to use those passive modalities it's a really great boon to people's mind-body health, because many people don't seek out these services until they are in a state where they really need help. Yeah.
Do you ever find it difficult having so many of these tools in your tool belt? Like, have you ever had the experience of walking in and your brain's thinking one thing, but that you're in another situation where all that information can't be relayed?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, and a great question. I've partly answered it by way of saying that I have these limitations around scope of practice. If someone has booked an RMT appointment, I need to work within that modality. And that's the most restrictive modality that I work within. However, I'm pleased to say that as I learn more and more about TCM, being in my final year of acupuncture school, which, the foundation of which is traditional Chinese medicine and all of its philosophies and practices, more and more I'm able to translate all of the practices through the various lenses. So, for example, one of my sort of specialties has become teaching yoga through the musculoskeletal lens. So what I mean is that whether I'm offering one of my clients, a therapeutic exercise home care practice, something that they can do in their day-to-day life that is going to help them prevent the pain that they've been experiencing, or help them achieve greater strength or greater flexibility, or whether I'm teaching a yoga class and I know that there are a lot of people in there, maybe I taught a yoga class last year when I had time, because I do love still teaching yoga. It's my absolute favorite, where a lot of my clients came, and a lot of my clients are healthcare professionals looking through the biomedical musculoskeletal lens. So if I know that a lot of those people are in my class, then I can teach about yoga through the musculoskeletal lens and help them connect with it. Or in the context of an RMT appointment, I can give yoga as home care practices, but I can actually describe it, demonstrate it, and teach it through the musculoskeletal lens, so that I'm remaining within my scope in that practice. And so more and more I'm finding, just like I recently did, some Ayurveda consultations where I then brought in actually the lens of TCM to help me refine my diagnosis, and also brought in the resources of traditional Chinese medicine in the form of Chinese herbs because they were more available to that person than Ayurvedic herbs. So I'm pleased to say that, yes, I did find in the beginning that I was a little bit challenged even to know which lens to look through if I had the opportunity to look through more than one. But now that I'm pretty deep into my traditional Chinese medicine training, which is my newest perspective and lens, I'm finding that I'm making all the connections, but amongst all the different perspectives and lenses, and I'm developing more and more facility with, looking through or speaking through a particular lens, but using all of the resources available to me as best I can. And I know that will just get better, that I will get better and better at that, because it will be a lifelong practice. Even, for example, as part of my TCM education, I've learned Qigong. And so I can easily give a Qigong exercise for home care. And there are tons of great Qigong exercises, because I know that you know some of them, and they're so simple and they're so easy to integrate every day. They're very repetitive. They're things people can do in the office, things people can do on lunch hour, things people can do while they're walking down the street. And so Qigong is actually such an incredibly valuable practice. Again, it's being divorced a little bit to some degree, maybe from the holistic intention of how to practice that. But even if I can introduce people to something in an RMT appointment through the musculoskeletal lens that actually was originally a part of the Qigong practice, there's so many ways in which all of these modalities can feed one another, and create openings and windows for people to enter into new experiences of their body and new experiences of their mind, but also allow me to still stay within the scope that is dictated by the bylaws of a particular regulatory college. So it's like right from the most esoteric and philosophical and lofty ideals right down to the practical and actually using it in everyday life and, remaining compliant with my scope of practice. Like, it's so definitely a lifelong pursuit, but I do feel like I'm finally navigating it in a way that everything's working really beautifully together for me and for my clients in all of those modalities so far.
So that sounds like a lot. There's a lot happening. You're doing many, many different things. How do you not burn out? Like in the course of a day, are all of these things happening, or is it one focus per day? How do you do it?
Yes, very good question. And wow, it has been a journey to figure out how to manage all this and what it looks like. And yes, so for example, on Mondays, I was having a TCM, an acupuncture class in the morning, an acupuncture class in the afternoon, and then going to work as a massage therapist. And then the next day I might be doing an Ayurveda consultation, in the morning, and then teaching a class at acupuncture school in the afternoon. I mean, this is realistically like my schedule last week. And so I would say that the most challenging thing for that aspect is changing hats. It's just putting on this hat and putting on that hat. And my, my previous answer kind of led to where I'm at now, which is that it is getting easier and easier to do that. And I do actually find that I appreciate my massage work more than ever now, because even though it's the most physically taxing work that I do, it's because I am comfortable with it now and I have very loyal clients. It's no longer mentally taxing. I'm very good at the differential diagnosis through the musculoskeletal lens, through offering therapeutic exercise and hydrotherapy as home care, through, the practice of massage itself, my ergonomics, my physical body, the mindfulness, the quality of mindfulness that I bring to it, all the things that I offer during the actual treatment itself. Those have become so second nature to me, kind of like teaching yoga is as well, that I don't have to think very hard to do it. And so it has become, much like teaching yoga, something that has become more and more just sort of a flow and a joy for me to do, because I can be really present with it, because that I've already done the work and the information I need is available to me. And the one pointed focus that both teaching yoga and doing massage allows me to practice, or at least maybe double arrowed awareness, my own breath, my own body, but then what I'm feeling under my hands or what I'm seeing in the room if people are practicing yoga and so on. That is such a therapeutic experience for me that I would say that in one sense, doing many different things is challenging because of putting on and taking off different hats, but it's also therapeutic because it does require different hats. So I might sit and teach a 3-hour class at acupuncture school, or sit and do an Ayurveda consultation, talking to people. But then for teaching yoga or doing massage, I'm standing and I'm moving my body, and I have a context in which to practice mindfulness of mind, mindfulness of body, mindfulness of breath, because I don't need to think very hard for those things because I already have all the information available. So another way of looking at it is also that all of these things I'm studying give me a bigger toolbox to draw from for my own mind-body health. And it is true that nonetheless, life happens and I fall off the wagon with my practices. That Monday schedule, for example, class in the morning, class in the afternoon, massage, that was just for one semester. And that was not a good situation. And it was very, very difficult for me to manage. I had my last week like that was last week, thank goodness. But I am getting better and better at checking in with myself and using the practices that are available to me. And so I'm really glad, and it has taken years to do so, but I'm really glad that now I am getting better at that. And a really neat thing happened recently, which is that I was having some health challenges because, age-wise, I'll just share that I'm in the perimenopause phase of life. And there are a lot of, small issues that arise. And I was trying to manage them a lot with acupuncture, because that's what I'm really immersed in right now, is acupuncture, and with Chinese herbs and so on and so forth. And I just wasn't getting the results that I wanted as quickly as I wanted. And then I thought to myself, I have so many other modalities. What would I suggest if someone came to me with this issue in an Ayurveda consultation and they wanted to use yoga, pranayama, asana? What would I suggest? And I actually went back to my practice of the bandhas, my practice of yoga asana, my practice of pranayama, my practice of meditation, my practice of mindfulness. And that was actually where I found faster relief for this physical symptom that was coming up for me than with acupuncture and Chinese herbs. And, if anyone knows anything about TCM or has heard these kind of terms, the issue was essentially one ultimately of stagnant chi, of stagnant liver chi, of chi that wasn't moving enough. And so by using these other modalities that were more movement-based, yoga and then bandhas to retain, the locks or valves of the perineal area and so on. For those who are listening, if they're not familiar with the Sanskrit word, it just turned out that was that caused a more immediate shift for me in terms of that particular issue than than the results that I was getting from acupuncture and Chinese herbs. So that's another amazing thing just for my own self-care and care of others, is just to recognize that, if someone has an issue with the movement of chi or the movement of prana, having them lie down on an acupuncture table and receive needles, but then just continue to work every day for 8 hours at a computer and not get adequate movement, exercise, breathing, that kind of thing. It might work eventually, but if I'm able to recognize that, maybe the fact that this person is sitting 8 hours a day and they're not getting adequate exercise, maybe they could do some yoga, they could do some pranayama, they could do some breathing exercises. And so it's pretty neat in that sense, both for my own self-care and for the care of others. And so, yeah, I'm getting better and better at self check-ins, getting better and better at remembering what's in my toolbox and using it as needed. And that feels really good.
Have there been, or do you foresee any downsides in offering so many things, or in having so many hats or tools, or did you maybe touch on those just already? Like belonging to all these regulatory bodies and scope of practice and things like that, or is there more?
I think it's just what you reiterated there. I think the one downside is is related to being in a province where I have a regulatory college, and just making sure that I follow the bylaws that require me to keep all of these practices separate, and all of the little tedious things that requires, that I need to book them separately and bill them separately, and, all that. But actually, aside from that, I have not thus far encountered any drawbacks to offering so many things. It seems just to get kind of like better and better and bigger in terms of how I can support people and how they can find me, so that we can work together to support them in, living the most fulfilling and meaningful life that they can.
Do you think that being a yoga teacher beforehand, I know you were an Ayurvedic practitioner before that, but the experience of being a yoga teacher, going to different studios every day, like you're already self-employed as a yoga teacher likely, and you're going to all these different studios, teaching different styles of classes, encountering different people, new people, regular people. Do you think that having that as one of your foundations helped you to be able to hold within yourself all these this sort of multidisciplinary healer inside of you? Do you think that has had anything to do with that?
100%. That's a great question, Mark. And I can honestly say that I haven't thought about it with that degree of clarity before. But you said it, and you said it perfectly, that all of the skills and practices that I learned as a practitioner of yoga, and then as a teacher of yoga, and then as a teacher of teachers of yoga, all of which just forced to continually reinforce all of the resources that are part of the Eightfold Path of yoga, have absolutely been lucrative in my capacity to diversify over the course of these years. And thanks for highlighting that for me, because I'm feeling really a deep and very real and beautiful sense of gratitude right now for the introduction to yoga that I had, and the opportunity I've had to share it, and how that has created the foundation for everything else. Thank you. Yeah. Wonderful.
We didn't even mean to tap into that, but we did. So there you go.
Yeah.
Well, let's stay in there. And because you're in this state of sort of remembering the sort of the foundations that yoga gave you, what advice would you give to people who are currently practicing, or people who are currently teaching yoga, who are thinking about diversifying? Like, what do you wish that someone had shared with you before you began this path?
Maybe
nothing. You can gatekeep it all for yourself.
No, I have two. So I have three points to make. So I'll answer the most practical question first. So in terms of advice for others, I would say that each person needs to think about what their goals are, their ultimate goals are when they want to learn something. I'll give an example. By way of an example, hopefully people can find themselves in this example. A woman came to the acupuncture school the other day when I was working in the student clinic. She's my age exactly, so 50. And she wanted to study just the herbs. She also was an RMT, but in another province, unregulated. So she's not a registered massage therapist here, because she would have had to do the board exams. And she was it had been too long since she had studied, and she didn't want to do that, but she still wants to diversify her practice. And she still practices massage as an unregulated, massage, with offering that service in spas and so on, and at her home clinic. So she wanted to add to it with herbs, and she wasn't sure which school to go to for it and so on, and what that would look like. And so we had a chat, and she wasn't thinking about pursuing acupuncture, but when we had a chat, the point is that I asked her, what's your ultimate goal? And for her, she actually is in a place in her life and a financial situation where she doesn't need to worry too much about the amount of money she makes. So I said to her, for example, insurance money for TCM, at least in British Columbia, is largely for people to receive acupuncture. It doesn't cover herbal consultations and the herbs. So if she only wanted to be a herbalist, I wanted her to know that there's not that much insurance money for it, and people have to pay out of pocket. And does that make a difference to her? Because that's going to affect the financial security, her own financial security, because of the clients that are available to her. So I think there are questions like that people have to ask, is not just what I'm interested in, but if I'm hoping to pursue this as a resource for financial, gains and security, do people have access to the income or the insurance money that they would need in order for me to have a client base that is going to give me that financial security? So one of the first things you need to ask is, does it matter if I make money at this? Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't matter that you make money at it and you're just going to pursue it because it's a passion, then you might just ask things like, what are my timeline and what kind of learning environment do I like most? For example, as another thing to think about, in Victoria, where I live in British Columbia, Canada, there are 2 acupuncture schools, which is a lot for such a small city. But the point I want to make is that one of them is extremely regimented, and it's a lot more like the registered massage therapy school that I went to. There's a lot of much younger people who are used to having been in school recently, and they want frequent quizzes and tests, and they want everything to sort of be laid out for them, and they want a little bit of hand holding through the process. They don't mind if someone's breathing down their neck saying, did you do that assignment? Did you do that? Don't worry. Don't forget to study for the quiz. And they want that because they've been in school and that recently, and that was their experience. And where I study is much more traditional. So having gone to school in Asia, when I went to school in India for Ayurveda, I'm comfortable with we'll get around to that at some point kind of attitude, or being very self-directed, where some teachers, there's a lot of different teaching styles, because a lot of my teachers are from China. And they have different styles based on where they learned and how they're practicing different styles of teaching. And so I think you can ask yourself too, what's the kind of learning environment that you're going to learn in best? How do you want to learn this thing that you're interested in? And those things can be important. Another thing that can be important is whether you do live in a province where things are regulated, and whether you plan to stay there or whether you plan to go somewhere that it's unregulated. The other big difference between regulated provinces and unregulated in Canada anyway is that in unregulated provinces, usually these professions pay less. So while you can practice them however you want, so you can do massage and acupuncture and all kinds of things all together because nobody's telling you what to do at the regulatory college, usually they pay significantly less because the status isn't there without the regulation. And then the insurance money isn't the same without the status and the regulation. So those are things that you'd want to ask yourself. But I think then the most practical thing you need to ask yourself too is just, what's your capacity? What do you have the capacity for? And I think that's a really important question to ask, coming from an Ayurvedic background and recognizing that sometimes we have a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of passion and a lot of interest, but we may not have the capacity. I think taking some time to reflect realistically on the capacity you have and how that relates to the learning path that you're thinking about taking is something that's really important, because I do see a lot of people pursuing, for example, an acupuncture certification and then leaving school because they just didn't anticipate the amount of work it was, or they tried to do it too quickly because they really wanted to finish quickly, but then they end up damaging their own health in the process because they don't bring in that self-care piece. They just become ambitious for various reasons, maybe even just out of financial need. They really need to get that certification and start practicing, but then they hurt their own mind, body health. And so I think these are all things to consider if you're looking at going down any other path for, additional modalities.
Was there anybody who you encountered along your research phase? I mean, you mentioned the person who was a counselor who mentioned sort of that the work was there, like there were massage therapists who were working a lot, and then there was the counselors who were looking for work. So it's like, it sounds like you consulted some people, but what was a lot of what you explored just based on your own research? Like, did you do a lot of asking other people?
I did not. Yeah. And you know what? Because my path has always been quite unique from others. And I don't frequently find people who either have taken my path. I think there are a lot of people out there who have done multimodality, learning and practice in terms of the services they offer. But I don't know them or don't have access to them. And so I didn't ask them. But I will say that there have been some influences on me. For example, the doctor of traditional Chinese medicine, trained in China in his 60s, who runs the school that I go to. When I first went there and talked to him about possibly taking the acupuncture program, he very sort of cutely said to me, massage is very tiring. You could do acupuncture until you're 80. And in fact, I think you should teach at our school because we need a teacher who knows the things you know as an RMT. And you can do teaching until you're 82. So I think you should come here and learn and teach as well. And I was like, well, when you put it that way.
Best job interview ever.
Yeah, which it wasn't even. I just went in there to discuss what it might look like to take a part-time program there. And so, so the bottom line is that I didn't ask many people who are, multimodality practitioners. And maybe it's just because I don't have access to them, because even right now, I think to myself, anyone I know who does it does maybe two things, but none of them are the same two things that I do. So maybe it's just that, or the same three things now that I do, which is sort of like yoga, massage therapy, and traditional Chinese medicine, and Ayurveda. Oops, 4. So the people I know don't tend to do, the people that I have access to aren't doing it just the way I'm doing it. So it wasn't obvious, that there was someone that would be able to enlighten me in regards what this experience might look like. So I didn't ask many people.
You're a trailblazer. That seems silly to ask you this question now because you've answered it multiple times, but let's just do it anyway. How has each discipline, or has it, influenced your perspective on health and wellness overall?
Yeah. And I love the opportunity to just very briefly summarize and reiterate something I said in the context of one of my other long rambling answers, which is I tell my clients, because it's the truth, I don't know what will work for you. I'm just throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. And different things work for different people. Different things work better for some types of disease or imbalance than other things do. Like I was talking about, acupuncture and herbs for this particular issue I was having versus yoga and pranayama for, getting things to change quickly. And then different things work at different times. At certain times, people are so overwrought and overwhelmed that they can't do the active practices. They just can't add something. They're not in a position to learn something new. And so you get them on the table for a massage, or you get them on the table for acupuncture, or you give them, herbs in granules that they just dissolve in hot water, as opposed to the Chinese herbs that most people are familiar with, the raw herbs that you have to boil up and decoct, and they smell and they taste bad. And so all of these disciplines have influenced me in the sense that they've helped to reinforce what I already knew was true, which is all these things I've already said. We don't always know what's going to work for a particular person, a particular illness at a certain time. And even when we do, sometimes next time, or the next person, or in the next season, or in the next phase of life, or the next iteration of that illness, it's something else. Even in the same person, they have a rheumatoid arthritis flare up at one time, and maybe this is what works at that time because of the season. We say go to Tai Chi more often and take these herbs, but then maybe they don't have access to the outdoor Tai Chi class in the winter. And so we have to use a different modality. It's like, well, now come for some massages and we'll help flush out those metabolites from the inflammatory flare-ups. And I'll give you some therapeutic exercise suggestions that you can integrate into your daily life. So it's just reinforced that, the more lenses we have to look through to understand what's happening and what the path to wellness might look like for a particular individual at a particular time, the better we are able to help that person. And that's why I encourage everyone to be open to all the different ways of looking at something. It's like the foundation of Ayurveda. There are 7 different philosophies, and sometimes they contradict each other, just like orthopedic perspective and acupuncture and Ayurveda might all contradict each other at certain times. But the fact is that every one of them has something of value for the purposes of health and healing. So it's worth looking through every lens, because we don't have all the information and we never will. So sometimes we just have to try things and see if they work and then go from there.
So you've shared a lot. You've offered some really interesting perspectives. Is there anything else you would like to share related to being a multidisciplinary practitioner or anything?
Well, I think that one of the most helpful things I ever did for myself in terms of deciding what path to take at times when it was a lot more challenging to see that clearly. And there were many years where it was challenging to know which direction to go, because none of these have been necessarily easy choices to make. Acupuncture school is expensive. RMT school is expensive. It's $35,000 for each of these programs. And that's a lot of investment. And so, and then it's also a lot of time. It's 2 to 3 to 4 years just for the basic programs for each of them, depending on which one you're looking at. And so it's a lot of investment, and, we can't make that lightly. So I guess that what I would counsel, especially for those listening to this podcast who probably already have a yoga practice, which can incorporate mindfulness and meditation, journaling, self-reflection, contemplation, I wouldn't counsel thinking about things forever, because I definitely lean toward the spectrum of overthinking. However, I think in a case like this, where you're making these big decisions, that it can be useful to take some time to think, to distill things down, kind of like I did at the beginning of our discussion, where I said, my ultimate goal has always been to somehow make the world a better place. What does that mean? And what does that look like? To me, what that looks like is doing my part as best I can, given my resources and my influences, to create an environment with more empathy. And what's required for empathy? Sensitivity. What's required for sensitivity? A person must have physical and mental health in order to have the capacity to be sensitive and empathetic to the people around them. And then just sort of boiling it down and saying, okay, well, what can I do to help people achieve mind-body health? Where are my aptitudes? Where are my passions? and then what is possible given my resources and my capacities at this time based on where I live. So it's really a multi-pronged sort of, mind map that I think I would really counsel people to take the time to think about it, because I would say my only regret in all of this, and this is kind of bringing in my regrets are my only regrets in all of this is in fact that I didn't go to, for example, acupuncture school a lot sooner in my life. And one of the reasons my regrets, it's not about financial. It's actually because, my mom passed away from breast cancer. And while sometimes it can be very hard to help the people we love the most because they're not always open to advice, sometimes I think, if I would have studied acupuncture when I was in my 20s instead of when I was in my late 40s, then maybe I could have helped more people I love, and maybe their health could have been better, and maybe I couldn't have. But I would say that that's my only regret, is not doing it sooner. So, but I would say that thinking carefully about what is the common thread in all the things I do and what's really most important to me, like what's my biggest goal at the top, and then how can I distill down and look at my capacities, my resources, where I am, what I have passion for, what I have aptitude for, and then figure out this bigger picture. I think it's worth it. And that might look a little bit different everywhere, every step along the way. And it might become clearer at a certain point. Like I said, it wasn't always clear to me. Sometimes it was murky. But I guess if I were to distill that into one line, it would be, if you're looking for a sustainable lifestyle of doing work you love and actually making money at it, I think that if those things are all important to you and you want them all, then I think that it's worth taking the time to deeply consider all of the things that I've pointed to in this answer and in this discussion.
Pretty sage words. I love the word mind map. It just sounds like such a fun practice. Looking ahead, is there anything further? So you finish at the traditional Chinese medicine school. Is there anything after that you would think, oh, I'd love to study that? Or do you feel like you have, I don't want to say reached the end of your studies because that sounds awful, but is there anything like pending?
I'm going to try to stay with, becoming a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner so I can do the herbs, and then maybe a DTCM, a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine. I'm going to try to ride that for a while, but I do consider that later in life, should I have the urge to learn again, it would probably be Masters of Counseling Psychology, which would be the next thing that I would undertake. And I would need to do a few courses just to finish my undergrad before I could even do that. So yeah, but other than that, I don't think so. I think I'm good.
No more.
I think I'm good. I think after this, after I become a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda practitioner and a yoga teacher trainer and an online, wellness course development curriculum deliverer and singer-songwriter, which I haven't even talked about yet. And that's the thing, is I really would love, I'm still writing music, songs quite avidly, especially the last couple of years. I've been writing a lot, and I'd really love to have some time before my voice potentially starts to change as a result of aging or something to do more recording as a singer-songwriter, to do more sort of touring, just little venues, intimate venues. And that's another whole area of my life and my self-expression that is also really meaningful to me and really wonderful for my self-care, for my health, and for filling up my well. And so, yeah, I'm going to try not to take on any big learning projects after finishing acupuncture school for a while.
Good plan. Nice just to enjoy sometimes too. And we'll have to do a whole other podcast about music, because that could be another wonderful conversation, I think.
Yes.
But thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me today and to share. I know you, but I felt like I learned a lot about you and a lot more about you and what it is that you do. And so I'm grateful on a personal level, but also for the podcast listeners. I think that there's some real sage words of wisdom in here, and I'm glad that they'll be out there in the world for others to take in and to hopefully help them on their path should they need it. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk with you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share this information with others. I hope that those of you listening have found something that will help you on your path.